What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity back Bumble. What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity back Bumble. Bump to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bump to the bump to the Bumble. Bump to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bump to the bump to the Bumble. Bump to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bump to the bump to the Bumble. Bump to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bump to the bump to the Bumble. Bump to the boot to the boot to the boot boot. Bump to the bass to the bass bass. Bump to the boot to the boot to the boot. Bump to the bass to the bass bass.
So if you're between the ages of 16 to 22, you may remember a certain film from 2005 called Zathura, a film by Jon Favreau 2 years after Elf. So he was really pumping out the classics back then. If you don't know this movie, it's basically that Jumanji clone, except you know now it's in
space!
Actually, I've never seen the original Jumanji before. You know, maybe I should watch that before. If you're confused what this movie's about, you can always read the cover of the DVD. A rollicking space adventure that delivers one heck of a wild ride. The hell does rollicking mean? Rollicking. Exuberantly lively and amusing. Okay. I've never heard rollicking before. Anyway, so this film is based off the book by the same author who wrote Jumanji 20 years earlier. Now, you'd think you could just write these stories within a year or two of each other, but apparently it took Van Ellisberg 20 years to realize he could write the same exact fucking story, but this time they go to space. But hey, I'm not an author, I don't know. Now, just to make this clear, I have almost no issues with Chris's story. It's imaginative, creative, and it has a nice moral at the end. The film itself is another story, directed by Jon Favreau, as I said, with a budget of $65 million, which I might add is the exact same budget as the original Jumanji film. This film flopped hard, only just making its budget back worldwide. This is one of those kids movies that played on Kids Network TV 20 million times, and I sat and watched it 20 million times as a kid.
And what started off as a boring Saturday is turning into the trip of a lifetime.
Read this for me. Meteor shower, take evasive action.
Because even inside your own home, you're never safe in outer space. On Cartoon Network.
And I cannot remember for the life of me what happened in this story. The only thing that jogs any memory of this film in the slightest is the robot. This robot, I tell you, implanted itself into my subconscious and affects me to this very day. But we'll get to that. Starting up, we see Tim Robbins playing catch with his son, Josh Hutcherson. That is a real sentence that I just said. I'm just as stunned as you are. Right away, we're introduced to the main conflict of the film. These two brothers absolutely hate each other. It's actually kind of funny to watch.
You're such a dick! What? It's a great grab.
And giving credit where credit is due, I firmly believe that these two boys did not like each other throughout the whole film. Even in the third act when they made up, they still seem like they hated each other's guts. Of course, the dad is divorced and is always at his wit's end with his children. We have a pep talk from the dad, which doesn't seem to go well.
You have an incredible imagination.
Is it better than Walter's?
I love how you can immediately tell why his wife left him. He's surrounded by his work and constantly stops his children from having fun to go back to working.
All you ever do is work.
Nice try.
So unfair.
The two boys' names are Danny and Walter. His name is Walter. I know it's a name, but come on. Even in 2005, Walter is an old man's name. Oh, but the plot thickens. See, the dad needs to leave for a while, and while he's away, he needs a babysitter. So we're introduced to the two boys' older sister, Lisa, who might be the worst character in this film.
Now, I know it's not Mom's house, and I know it's a little creaky, but give it some time. It's going to grow on you.
Well, I don't want to stay here alone.
Well, you're not going to be alone. I'm going to wake up Lisa.
No, what? Are you crazy? Don't do that. She's sleeping. Let her sleep.
No, please, don't do that. No. Now, normally that would mean I absolutely hate every second she's on screen, but that's not the case here. What I mean, her character is so terrible that it makes me laugh from how awful it is. Kristen Stewart spends almost 2/3 of the film in a plastic mannequin, and the last third of this film hitting on Dax Shepard. Her initial introduction is also the most lazy and hilarious thing on the planet.
I have a date tonight. We're hooking up at like 8.
So that's 6 hours from now.
What's your point?
My point is I need you to look after the boys. By the way, it makes me uncomfortable when you say hooking up.
Why? It's not like it means anything.
So I realized while editing through this that I actually really enjoyed Tim Robbins' performance. He seems to be really enjoying himself, which is nice.
Okay?
I'm not deaf.
Huh?
I'm not deaf.
What?
Dad, okay. 15 minutes. Just close the door.
I'd like to think she's hibernating to prepare for her role in Twilight. Everyone is so cookie-cutter 2000 stereotyped to the point you think it's almost a joke, but it isn't.
You have a wonderful opportunity to cast the best people that there are. I really didn't want to compromise in any way. I knew that movies live and die by the cast. You could have great effects and great sets, and if you don't have real emotional human beings that you enjoy watching and experience the film through, then you don't have an emotional connection.
But it really shows sometimes. Like, I know they're just kids, but good lord is this line hilarious.
When did you get so mean?
I'm not mean, Danny. I'm in 4th grade. I have a girlfriend. You know how dads we have to grow up? Well, this is what it looks like.
I'd love to be in that room like, Daddy, I got a boyfriend. Oh, that's great, honey. What's his name? Walter? How old is he? So anyway, Danny and Walter bicker for a bit longer while their older sister ignores them. Danny throws a ball at Walter's face and then Walter tries to kill him. You know, standard brother stuff.
You're dead!
Danny hides in the dumbwaiter that this ancient house has, and Walter sends him down to the basement. Danny finds a board game that seems pretty cool looking, so after Danny gets bullied and forced into the basement by his older brother, who probably and realistically does not care if he doesn't come back until his dad comes home. Hey, I'm gonna guilt trip my brother into playing a dusty old board game with me. That seems like a great idea. Danny reluctantly turns the key and pushes the button on the side of the game, and we see a rocket move on a chain. After a few spaces, a card pops out of the side of the game. Danny can't read, and he's really self-conscious about it, so we spend the next 2 minutes hearing a kid pretend that he doesn't know how to read.
Meet, or shoot. Meteor shower, take evasive action.
What exactly am I supposed to get out of the way of exactly?
Doesn't take evasive action.
But it's okay, the shaking continues, and then hilarity ensues. Now the meteors stop falling because the game decided that they were most likely dead after the assault, and the kids realize that they're floating in outer space. And Walter is so shocked and scared that he does everything in his power to stop Danny from opening the door to the vacuum of space. Okay, Josh, in this scene, Danny is opening the door into the void of space. Your reaction will set the tone for the absolute wonder and awe the audience will feel throughout the rest of the film. The set pieces, the plot, the special effects. Okay, you got it? Go!
Wait.
That was perfect! The one aspect of the film I found really underwhelming was both of these characters just like to stop and stare at everything, mouth agape like, whoa, this is like really bad and stuff. It's like if Beavis and Butthead went to space, but instead of saying anything funny, they just stood there looking at an alien like, look, it's an alien. There's interesting things happening all around them, but the characters don't seem to be interested in it at all. They seem to do the same things multiple times throughout the film. Turn the key, press go, card pops out, they read it, and then they freak out, react to whatever the card says in a wacky stereotypical 2000s way, then they'll probably bicker at each other and yell at each other for a few minutes and then do it all over again.
That's it. We gotta keep playing.
I'm not playing that thing.
Yes, we are. It says we go home if we win.
It didn't say that.
Yes, it did. Pieces reset at the end of each game.
All I know is that when we play this game, bad things happen.
Well, all I know is that when I played that game, I got promoted. So I'm gonna win this thing and get us home.
Oh, brother!
Also, just for the record, this is the part where Lisa gets frozen. Why? Well, because the game decides she should be. You idiot. You dummy. Honestly, the only thing that kept me watching was my nostalgia for this movie, and my nostalgia quickly faded after this next scene, that being Walter's robot. This scene is one of the dumbest parts of the movie, I think. Walter spins a card and it says that his robot is defective. Danny points out that you don't even have a robot, and then a shadow comes marching in. The shadow turns out to be a small, tiny toy robot.
Is it gone yet?
We also can't forget about this line.
That's your robot?
Yes, I got one.
What does it do?
Anything I want.
Give me a Juicebox, biatch.
It's not that big of a deal. What also isn't that big of a deal is this weird choice of framing when the robot comes into frame while getting bigger. There's nothing bad about this, it's just a little funny, I think.
Such a jerk. Dude, you're just jealous because I have a robot and you don't. Why would I want?
Like, I know you want to show the robot getting bigger, but it just doesn't fit. You know, this music doesn't feel appropriate to what I was feeling as a 7-year-old boy watching this robot for the first time.
Such a jerk. Dude, you're just jealous. Why would I want?
Okay, so the robot gets really big, as we've seen already, but then the robot starts chasing Walter, and only Walter, around the house, trying to murder him. And I'll be honest, this scene scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. The robot smashing through the walls and repeating words of doom towards Walter. But I gotta say, it could have been a lot scarier. That's not to say there aren't things I like about the robot. The overall design is good, and the scary and deep robotic voice is pretty much as what scared the pants off of child Luke, along with the red glowing eyes and the expelling steam from its head area. It's different to what I thought robots looked like at the time. The movement is what bothers me. In the featurette, it shows that John had an actor put on the robot's head and torso, but then he just blue screened in the arms and legs. And I think that made it look way more cartoony than it needed to be. Here's what I mean. Here's how the robot walks into the room when it's small.
Emergency City. Emergency City.
And here's the robot running after Walter. Like, to a little kid, it's still pretty scary, but when it's running, it really does just look like a dude in a robot suit with human arms and legs running after you. When the robot busts through the walls, it stumbles and trips over things, and I think that brings down the pants-shitting terror potential that I think it could have had.
So what we needed to get out of the performer in the robot, though, was, you know, a believable performance, which is a little difficult to judge. Honestly, when you see a guy in a robot suit running around on dailies, you think, oh my God, this isn't gonna work.
We like the fact that a performer wearing a part of this suit is out of balance, and he's struggling to keep his balance, and that's a hard thing for an animator to kind of capture. So we had the performer just run through the set, kind of slamming into things, trying to stop, really fighting against what he was wearing, even though they did a great job.
In my opinion, a better way to do it is to make the robot a slow marching death machine. When it bursts through the wall, have it barely inhibit the movement speed. And here, it just looks like a dude slipping on a banana peel. That's not scary, that's dopey and stupid. The characters are trapped in a floating house in the middle of space, they're not gonna outrun the damn thing. Now, you might be saying, well Luke, it's a kid's film. Maybe the robot isn't meant to scare kids. And to that I say, the tone says something else. This is obviously meant to scare the shit out of some kid. And there's nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is it could have been better. It could have been scarier. Anyway, they disable the robot in the basement and they begin spinning turns again. The boys try to help Kristen Stewart's body and treat it with the utmost care.
I want to be here when she wakes up.
Where are you going?
After that, Walter spins a card that just says reprogram on it. Huh, wonder what that's gonna be used for. After a few more rounds of playing, the kids spin another card and it says an alien race called Zorgons are attacking them.
I don't think it's bad. Just visitors.
Now that the Zorgons have come on screen, I can bring up something else that's been bothering me. So you're probably thinking,
Luke, this is a kid's movie. Why are you giving it the business when the rest of the world already forgot about it years ago?
Well, for one, therapy. And for two, it seems to be well loved in the Zoomer world. And as a resident Zoomer, unfortunately, I really don't get it. Thirdly, it really could have been so much more. I mean, you have the imaginative story where kids go to space. Literally anything can happen. And you just make a dumb story about being a good brother. Those life lessons are important and all, but like, you're in space. space. Am I crazy in thinking that actual kids wouldn't act like this at all and instead maybe use their imaginations and explore what their kid minds think space is actually like? At least in Jumanji, it was like stuff that happens on planet Earth. Another big issue is the mix of CGI and practical effects. They aren't exactly the most seamless thing in this film. A lot of this you could chalk it up to being made in 2005, in which CGI didn't look quite as good as it does now, which isn't the VFX people's fault, but it just makes you think how much better it could have been. You spend all of this effort and money on making detailed puppets and costumes, only for the final finished film to have this mid-2000s garbage digital sheen on it. Again, not entirely the fault of the creators, but the push to implement new technology over what's known to work well is really sad to see. It's not like this was a small-budget indie kids film. This was a Columbia Pictures $65 million fall release in 2005. And now we look back and just see shitty effects and bad acting. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to meet the final character of this film. That's right, the one, the only,
the delicious
Dax Shepard.
Which one of you me? Who was it?
Him.
Who I thought was Zachary Levi for the longest time, but I'm now just realizing that they're two different people. Oopsies. Dax Shepard's character tells them how they can hide themselves from the Zorgons, and he starts by throwing pots and pans everywhere for no reason. Yeah, sure, this is hiding the house real well. So Dax Shepard, Danny, and Josh Hutch go around the house turning off all the lights and the heat sources in an effort to hide the house from the Zorgons. The Zorgons apparently have the memory capacity of a goldfish because once they turn out all the lights, they just kinda dip. Shepard lights a match and throws it onto a couch full of gasoline as bait to lure the Zorgons away. Also, the film makes a dumb mistake here by Dax Shepard saying this.
Burning gas, that's probably what brought him in the first place.
Wait, I thought it was the card that spun them? I mean, that's how they got Dax Shepard. If it was just burning gas, why didn't they come within the first few minutes of them starting the game? Like, yeah, Danny lit the gas stove, but the Zorgons didn't come until they spun the actual card. And Dax Shepard says that the pilot light's been on this whole time. I guess when you're a story writer or filmmaker, you can decide whatever rules you want, even if they clash with each other. So the Zorgons are attracted to heat sources, right? So do they just not see the house anymore? Do they see heat or do they feel it? Like those cameras on ghost hunting shows? If so, why do they just abandon the house altogether? If they know that a heat source was coming from this floating cube literally just a few seconds ago, why wouldn't they just try to explore it further? They're smart enough to build giant flying rockets and burn things to create heat for themselves. But no, I guess it's the same effect as a moth flying towards a lamp.
Yeah, I thought I smelled heat.
After dealing with the Zorgons, Dax Shepard the astronaut raids the refrigerator and begins eating a sandwich like a voracious beast, while Danny and Walter watch in shock and horror. Walter tries to kick him out by showing him that he is indeed a fleet admiral. Oh yeah, earlier Walter spun a card that said he was a fleet admiral and he got to move forward a few spaces or some shit. I don't know, I can't remember. So Space Stick sees this and he's like... And he shows that, oh, whoop-de-doo, he's also a fleet admiral, which implies that he also was a Zathura player at one point. But now he's an unlockable, which makes sense, I guess.
It's just a card, bug nuts.
Luke, the game is magic. Don't think about it too much. So Walter and Danny get into a fight, go figure, about whether or not to actually kick him out, and it ends with this line.
Whose brother are you, his or mine?
Wow, that was subtle. I'll be honest, I liked the flyby reflection shot earlier where you could see Walter's face in the astronaut's helmet, but this was just like, hey kiddos, in case you missed that, here's a softball for you. So Danny lets him stay because he's the one that spun the stranded astronaut card in the first place, and they begin to play the game again, with Dax Shepard taking the role of mediator between these two boys who are at each other's throats, until someone pushes it a little too far.
It's cold. Shooting star. Make a wish as it passes. I hope you win. I don't care who wins. It's because you never win at anything, Danny.
Hey.
What? That's why he cheats all the time, because he can never win. No, I don't. Yeah, you do. And you almost got me killed. He's the one who cheated. This is all your fault. Everything's your fault. It's your fault Mom and Dad got divorced.
Hey!
Calm down. Have some dip.
You suck!
Now, I do understand where the story is going. They're going to have to come to terms with each other, and I think this moral is a pretty good one. Your brother is all you got, so don't try to kill him.
No matter how much you want to grab him by the neck and choke him out till you see the life drain from his eyes.
So, spoiler alert, the Zorgons do come back, and it's all Kristen Stewart's fault. Yes, the reason for the alien invasion in this film is because of Kristen Stewart. Put that on a t-shirt. So Dax Shepard has the brilliant idea to get rid of the Zorgons by making the house more visible? Kristen Stewart is not happy, so she flips out on them like any sensible person.
You guys actually set the house on fire!
But Lisa is allured by the soft eyes of Dax Shepard, as we all would be, and joins in to try to get everybody home. This exchange between Lisa and Dax Shepard only gets creepier as the film goes on. I would have loved to just see her keep living in her disbelief and just have walked off into space like, oh my god, I'm telling Dad that you burned the house down and brought a cute guy over? I'm gonna tell him right now. But the Zorgons are back, and the crew needs to get their asses in gear or they'll be eaten because Danny likes to remind us that we're meat. But uh-oh, whoopsies, Danny did an oopsie poopsie. Danny did a bad thing when he got pissed at Walter. The Zorgons, when they landed, just took the entire living room with them. And the game was in there too. Also, his pet hamster was in there, but we don't care about that. So they reconvene and decide on a plan. They get their walkie-talkies from the bedroom, and Dax Shepard goes into the Zorgon ship to look for the game. And we only hear his venture from the perspective of the walkie-talkie in the house.
Zorgons. Oh my god. The place is crawling with them. They're all over the basement. What? Wait. I think in the corner I see the game. Yeah, the box is right there. Hang on. I'm gonna get closer.
Did he hit the game?
Wait a minute. I mean, I understand saving money by using stock sound effects. If you're a film student and making short films with no money, and even on YouTube, that's okay. And if they had just picked another sound, maybe I wouldn't even notice. I was born 7 years after Doom came out, and I recognized that sound. I'd never even played Doom until like 2016. Is it not outrageous to think that this decision was kind of lazy? What even made that sound anyway? We'll see in a second that Zorgons aren't camels. Maybe you're thinking, oh, well maybe it's those three-eyed goats that they have. Well, no, they sound like goats because, well, they're goats. Danny comes up with a brilliant plan to go down to the dumbwaiter and retrieve the game himself, because apparently the game was right in front of where the dumbwaiter door opens up. We also get some more of this great chemistry between Josh Hutcherson and Jonah Bobo that we've been missing.
Listen to me. It's gonna be real easy, okay? I'm just gonna lower you down there, grab the game, and we'll pull you up. Yeah. Nothing's gonna happen to you, okay? Yeah. Because I'm your brother. And that's what being a brother means. It means I'll never let anything happen to you.
Oh yeah, that's some chemistry right there. I fully believe that these guys just hate each other. But now Danny is lowered into the basement, and now Danny goes after the game.
Wait. I see the game. It's on the
Well, gee dang it, they have to get rid of the Zorgons once and for all. So they run into the basement where the robot is, and the robot still wants to kill Walter. But he uses the reprogram card, and the robot cleans house. Literally.
Use the card. Wait. Reprogram.
But huzzah, they get the game back and get rid of the Zorkons, and Walter gets a second shooting star card, Jesus Christ. And he wishes for Dax Shepard's brother to come back, and big twist, Dax Shepard's brother is Danny.
Danny.
Thank you.
I didn't.
You did a good job. You did better than I did.
Thanks. It was me. Yeah.
Oh my god! And I wanted to...
Now they only have a few more turns left before they win, so they spin and spin until...
Would you like to swing on a star, move ahead 9 spaces? Danny, you won.
I won? You won?
You won, Danny. You beat the game.
Wait, Danny won? How the hell did Walter get Fleet Admiral, 2 shooting star cards, and a 9 spin and still lose? Man, Walter sucks at games, and I need to stop watching this movie.
I think we're home.
Now they're back home to just before Danny pushed the button to start playing the game in the first place.
Walter, don't push that button.
What was that? I couldn't understand you. I don't speak second place.
You know, it's been getting harder and harder to dance around the fact that this insanely old board game didn't just release some toxic gas and cause hallucination and do shared experiences on the children. Can we get an AoE on the range of the effectiveness of the board game, John? No? You're too busy swimming in your piles of Disney money that you got from The Lion King 2019? You know, I can't blame the guy for trying, I guess. If I starred in Ben Affleck's Daredevil and then made Elf and then made this, I wouldn't give a shit either. The last line of this film is an incest joke.
Still think I have gorgeous eyes? Walter, what?
Man, you can really tell where this film gave up. And that's when Danny turns on the gas stove to cook the mac and cheese. It's basically the filmmakers telling you to turn your brain off because nothing matters anymore. So if you disagree with anything that I've said in this video, know that the film doesn't care either. Happy Halloween!